to you all. My name is Sihle Boyo, and I'm the project manager for the African Climate Action Partnership. And on behalf of the Growing Government Engagement in Energy Access, which is GGEEA in short, that is co-delivered by CLAB-ER and FCAP. We would like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us today for our second webinar from our webinar series that is titled Techno-economic and Business Model Foundations for Productive Use of Energy and Mini-grids in Africa. So for those who weren't able to join the first webinar and are interested in catching up, we do have, it's available on YouTube and we can share the link during the course of the webinar. It was essentially about, well, the first webinar was essentially about analyzing the potential to unlock energy agriculture synergies, which provided an overview of analytical approaches to assess the potential for renewable energy potential in agricultural value chains. And today's webinar is going to be on building a business case for productive use of energy in mini-grid deployment and operations. So what we're trying to have in this webinar, we want to explore perspectives and learnings on how to effectively develop delivery models and business models for integrating PUE into mini-grids projects. And without any further delays, I will just go through today's agenda. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we will have, right after me, we will have an introduction to GGEEA, which will be presented by Harry, and then it will be followed by an introduction to AMP, which will be presented by Annabelle. I'm not sure if he has joined yet, but he can let us know if he has joined in the chat. And then we're followed by our first speaker, which will be speaking on like insights into PUE delivery models, business models, and integrations into rural mini-grids from the Africa Mini-Grids Program, RMI, DG. And then we have a question and answer moment. Then it's going to be followed by the second speaker, which is Amon. He's going to be speaking on perspectives and experiences from developers from AMDA. Then right after that, we also have a moment for question and answer. And then after the question and answer moment for each speaker, we will have a discussion session that will be guided by questions which we'll share with you closer to that time or closer to that session. And then right after that, we'll just have our closing and remarks, basically. Just a quick one on housekeeping. Please keep your mics on mute to avoid distractions unless you want to speak. And if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or drop your question in the comments section or the Q&A box. We will have a question and answer at the end, just like I mentioned. Or if you have any questions for the speakers, you can just raise your hand or just drop your question in the box. And yeah, I think I will just hand over to our first presenter or speaker, which is Harry, who's going to be speaking on introduction to GGEEA. And then right after that, he'll be followed by Annabelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Sigle. Let me open my camera. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, good afternoon, good morning, depends on where you are. Before the conference, I want to talk a little bit about our organizer of this event, our project, and the implementing. GGEEA, Growing Government Engagement in Energy Access, is a part of Transforming Energy Access program, powered by Carbon Trusts and funded by UK8. GGEEA is a key partnership between CLAB-ER, African Association for Rural Electrification, based here in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, and South of North, African Mini-Grids Community of Practice, MGCOP, under the African Climate Action Partnership, AFCAP, formerly the Africa Leads Partnership based in Cape Town, South Africa. The GGEEA project aims to expand its source of capacity building program targeting public officials, such as ministries, local government, and rural electrification agencies for the off-grid sectors. It aims to improve data sets, understanding of why mini-grids project fail, and foster greater public-private engagement to ensure more bankable mini-grid projects are developed. The project intends to benefit rural communities within sub-Saharan Africa through the provision of affordable and reliable energy access. Yes. The project will aim also to include the notion of inclusivity in energy access to promote the Sustainable Development Goal number 7. It means to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern electricity for all. Through building the capacity of public sector officials and decision makers, this project seeks to create an enabling environment in governments and for the large-scale implementation for mini-grids to facilitate enhanced energy access in sub-Saharan Africa. The intended impact is to increase the use of affordable, decentralized clean energy option for poor households and enterprises in sub-Saharan Africa. As activities, GGEEA has organized some online courses and webinars as today. The project has planned workshop and roundtable discussion with all players, including private sector, funder groups, and civil society. The project will publish also knowledge documents on key lessons from its activities. As I mentioned before, GGEEA is implemented by Source of North and GGEEA. Source of North supports national and regional responses to climate change through policy and knowledge interventions, partnerships, and deep collaboration. SSN does this connecting people and information, enhancing capability to mobilizing resources to respond innovatively to the challenge of opportunities that climate change presents. Being positioned in the global south affords SSN a deeper understanding of and connection to the climate and development challenges facing the region. SSN enhances developing countries' access to climate information by brokering climate knowledge to formalize exchange among various stakeholders. SSN assists also decision makers in delivering climate-compatible development by informing policy formulation and implementation. Next, about African Climate Action Partnership. Yes, the African Climate Action Partnership, formerly known as Africa Leads Partnership, as I said before, brings together representatives from government, civil society, and the private sector working to advance low-emission development strategies across the continent. Under the umbrella of Global Climate Action Partnership and alongside the over-regional platform in Asia and Latin America and Caribbean, the AFCAP works to address LED's priorities and challenges specific to Africa through peer-to-peer learning and engagement. The Secretariat based at Source of North provides a platform for individuals and organizations from public, private, and non-governmental sector to share experiences, knowledge, lessons learned, and best practices, and to collaborate or coordinate on LEDs design and implementation. We also endeavor to facilitate engagement and linkages across networks and initiatives, thus contributing to the achievement of partnership objectives. For those who need more details I ask you to go to through the website of LEDS. And last but not least, about CLABIA, the African Association for Rural Electrification is a bilingual network, technical network, which brings together about 40 agencies and structures in charge of rural education in 35 countries of the continent. By pooling know-how and feedback from its members, the club year aims to strengthen the capacity of African institutions of rural education and finding appropriate solution to this problem. Club year aims also to accelerate the development of access to electricity services in rural areas in Africa by creating the relevant framework conditions and by systemizing the beneficial sharing of experiences between agencies and structures responsible for rural education. The idea is to actively participate in achieving SDG 7 and sustainable energy for all purposes. The vision and mission translate into the following three objectives: development of capacities and skills, capitalization and management of knowledge and communication, and resources mobilization. That is all the information I wish to share with you. Before I turn back to Sigrid, our moderator, just a big thank to our speaker today, Amon from AMDA. Have a good time with us and during this webinar. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harry, for that. Yeah, I will just hand over to the next introduction. You can take the floor in the phone.
Thanks, Nicola. Hi, everyone. I'm Aníbal Gomez. I'm a senior associate with RMI here representing AMP. If you can go to the next slide, Sila. Just wanted to provide a brief introduction to AMP before we have Deji speaks on further about the AMP program and the PUE framework for business development. But the African Mini-Grids program is a flagship initiative on energy access. This is funded by Jeff, led by UNDP and in partnership with RMI. So the AMP's objective is to bring scaled up commercial investment in mini-grids to early stage mini-grid markets by increasing their commercial viability. And as we likely know, mini-grids are a great technology for reaching rural electrification, but there's key barriers of not having it commercially viable, and there's not sufficient investment from the public or private sector in mini-grids today. So while there's a lot of actors supporting mini-grids in Africa, AMP has identified a special focus around reduction of mini-grid costs, with an objective of lowering costs for renewable energy mini-grids by promoting innovative business models and cost reduction, which in turn will make mini-grids more financially attractive and attracting commercial financing investors into the sector. So this cost reduction in hardware costs, soft costs, or financing costs in conjunction with innovative business models will increase capital flows to the profit of end users, will benefit from lower tariffs and expanded service compared to the baseline. Next slide, please. The AMP currently operates under 21 countries. We have 3 rounds. First round are partners that have started implementation, second round who are beginning implementation, and third round soon to start. And we partner across multiple stakeholder groups, whether that's national governments, development partners, private sector, and civil society. We know that there's a lot of good work being done around the mini-grid sector, and we're not necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel, but we're trying to create these key partnerships and complement existing initiatives working across sub-Saharan Africa already. Next slide, please. So there are different activities under different national projects based on their country context and needs, but for the most part, all 21 countries will follow a common architecture with some standard components, which you can see on the left-hand side. I won't go into full detail on each of these, but these are the key components we see critical to creating an enabling environment for mini-grid development. On the right-hand side, you can see areas of specialization that AMP has identified where the program sees we can add particular value and seek a clear identity in addition to its cost reduction focus. These three areas of opportunity are one being mini-grid delivery models, so the government's preferred approach to develop a market for mini-grids and on which it is important to have national buy-in from a range of stakeholders. The second being leveraging data and digital tools for mini-grid development and particularly to reduce mini-grid costs. And third, which you'll be hearing from my colleague Deji on, is productive use of energies as a way to improve the economics of mini-grid investments while enhancing the social and economic benefits of energy access. And quickly just wanted to run through the framework. Next slide, Susan, please. Through the framework of AMP and how it is structured and operated. There's the 21 national projects complemented by the regional project, which is hoping to augment country-level activities and its goals by sharing knowledge tools, making knowledge tools, learning about best practices, and making them available to the 21 national countries. And with that, I'll wrap up quickly and pass over so you can hear from Deji. But
Yeah, over to you, DG.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks, Anibal. And good morning, afternoon, everyone. So if you could go to the next slide, please. We'll be talking about the importance of productive use of energy. Just a reminder to what we had during the last webinar. I had the chance to look at the videos. The PUE applications, where PUE typically shows up within economic activities, and then the Energizing Agriculture program example, and we'll end it with reflections on some of the lessons that we took away from the implementation activities. So productive use of energy, of course, speaks to that intersection between energy and economic activities, such that there is a win-win for both the energy operator or mini-grid operator in this case, by way of increased capacity utilization and, and guaranteed revenues. While economic activities then get significantly improved in rural communities, given that livelihoods will be improved, efficiencies will be improved as well. And then people can begin to prioritize activities that they just couldn't get involved in. So for example, in a rural community where they produce maize, and they just sell it raw. If there is a milling equipment, some people can decide to play in that space and generate a lot of value, or even e-mobility to move agricultural produce from the farmstead to the market, or even to the homes. Typically, productive uses have been divided into about 4 different types of uses. Energy shows up in agriculture through irrigation, for example, threshing, milling, cold storage, and then there are social and public uses, which speaks to education, healthcare, particularly vaccine storage, having that ensuring that those vaccines do not go bad, and just having that seamless cold storage solutions. And of course, this has other medical applications and ICT and so on, industrial uses, and then of course, commercial uses. Very quickly, I'll speak about how we've been able to, divide this into phases. That is from the first stage of identifying the economic activities that can be identified, and then executing contracts to get those done. If you could go to the next slide, please. Productive use of energy, as I mentioned, have a lot of benefits for both economic sectors and even players within the energy space. But then there are processes that one can follow to be able to deploy productive uses of energy or the equipment. Just reflecting on new mini grids that would require this kind of framework. Of course, the first thing that has to be done is, identifying the main economic activities within the community, just doing a long list of primary economic activities and how they can be potentially electrified, thinking about the potentials for sustainability, revenue generation, and so on. And then narrowing this down to those that are viable and ready for immediate electrification, and then ensuring that everyone is on board, including the mini grid operator, the community, and some other stakeholders. And then based on that, identify, agree on the equipment that will be deployed, execute contracts, and go ahead with the deployment. We could go to the next slide, please. So the Energizing Agriculture program in Nigeria is an example of this, demonstrating the benefits of pairing mini grids with productive uses. The Energizing Agriculture program is an initiative of RMI in collaboration with the Rural Electrification Agency in Nigeria, funded by the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. And we intervened particularly in the agricultural space, ensuring that energy shows up for value addition within the ag space, from cold storage to deploying electric vehicles for farm logistics, oil palm milling, rice milling, and of course retrofitting fossil fuel driven equipment, or even swapping them out for the electric ones. So EAP, as it is called, helped matchmake energy use companies, that is the equipment providers, with mini grid developers or operators to find suitable sites. So we had a boot camp where the different stakeholders came together to identify business models that can power this deployment of productive use of energy appliances and ensure that they come up with viable financial models and, of course, business models rather. And BAP provided some form of support for the productive use equipment cost for the pilot. So if effectively we're able to break down silos in the ag and electrification sectors, as we're able to bring together partners to capitalize on their unique sets of expertise to design the risk and scale market models that pair electricity access with the means to use it. If you could go to the next slide, please. So this is just a snapshot of the different initiatives under the Energizing Agriculture program. I know we want to learn some more about the business model, so I'll be taking each of these initiatives one after the other. So if we think about a typical agricultural value chain where, for example, maize or even rice is harvested from the farm, it takes, the process will require, drying, ensuring that, the moisture content is gone, and threshing, so we are able to separate the chaff from, from the grain, and then the hull or clean, and also meal, and before it then gets to the final consumer, or it gets to the final form. So we looked at these processes, and we realized that in rural communities, particularly where we intervened, there are a lot of value that the rural people can definitely attract by having electric rice milling equipment, for example. Because in certain communities they already have the rice milling machine, but the fossil fuel driven one. And very recently, I know those that are from Nigeria on this call will relate. The petrol subsidy was removed sometimes last year in Nigeria around May. And since that time, the cost of, and it's world over, right? The cost of assessing petrol or even diesel is significantly high. And it makes a lot of sense to begin to think about cost minimization so that the processors can generate more revenue. And again, we also found that some of the fossil fuel driven equipment sometimes turn out poor quality output. So by way of broken grains, which commands less value in the market, and then mill breakdowns because the equipment is old or there's something not just going well. So the business model very quickly, we worked with Energy Excel and Afrimash to provide rice milling equipment to a local processor who runs the rice mill, and then the mini grid powered the rural mini grid powered the rice mill, and then we ensure that there was a repayment. So as much as we subsidized to a certain level, we made sure that the processors made some payments for the equipment, and that was deployed. That payment was just based on the lease to own model, so that it's flexible. And before I move to the next uh, value chain, I would like to invite you to visit the RMI website, where we've been able to curate some of the lessons that we took away from this initiative. And I'm sure there are a lot of lessons to learn in our report titled Harvesting Sunshine: How Productive Use of Mini-Grid Electricity Makes Farmers Richer and Energy Cheaper. The next business model that I'll be talking about is within the cold storage space, where we worked with Cold Box Store. Next slide, please. To address post-harvest losses, particularly for fishing communities where they have to harvest fish and then sell below the acceptable margins because they are scared that will go bad. And that cycle goes on and on. And so we worked with Code Box Store, who stepped into the community, provided walk-in code room, and so and provided options to the community. The first option is selling to the code room, so that the fish can be taken to high value markets, and then the value is generated across the different nodes of the value chain. Or the fisherman or the business person just takes the fish to the working code room and pays a fee to store for a certain number of days or certain period to mitigate that risk of spoilage. The mini-grid developer here, Ask Mini-Grid, provides electricity, and then the code room pays for the electricity consumed from the process. And then Code Box Store supplies to a premium off-taker in Lafia or Abuja, so that the margin will keep the entity, the business running. A few lessons from this particular model. First is that um, fish, because the kind of fishing that they do, which is just capturing from from water bodies within the community, means that it might be seasonal, and that fish quantities have to be right for this kind of investment to scale and to be sustainable. And again, because in this part of the world, productive use of energy, the market has not developed so well, to the extent that there's little tailored financial products to be able to support grow and invest, but the critical infrastructure that is required for cold storage. But we did test out this model, and we found that we're able to reduce, avoid about one ton of fish going to waste, and also generates a lot of revenues for particularly women within the community. The next initiative that I'll talk about is that model that speaks to swapping out fossil fuel uh, processing equipment within rural communities for the electric options. We started out by retrofitting, and we realized that was not going to scale because the success of a motor retrofit program depends on a number of factors. The first will be the condition of the equipment, the age, and the self-repair habits of the processors and their perceptions. Because they've been using fossil fuel equipment for a while. They naturally believe that they can make some tweaks. Sometimes if something goes bad because they had invited technicians in the past, they know where the person worked. They try to imitate the person, and sometimes they get it right, or most times they create additional problems. And so if you decide to carry out a motor retrofit, you might get into the same issue because they are not just going to wait to get that fixed. They might start working on the equipment themselves, which might damage some of the components, given that electric equipment are, of course, different from the ones that they've always used. So within this model, we worked with Farm Warehouse. Farm Warehouse is an entity that promotes productive use appliances, and they provided the equipment to the processors using the pay-go model, and they also did like they facilitated the introduction to technicians for onward maintenance services, and assessing helps also helped assess help the processors to assess spare parts. The mini developer Prado Power supplied electricity, and of course, the local processor, making a lot of money from the processing activities now that energy cost is significantly lower. In certain situations, they recorded between 40 to 60% cost reduction in energy. And so they were able to pay for mini grid and also pay back for the equipment. Um, we have a similar model for the oil palm milling. I won't spend a lot of time here. And then maybe the last model before I talk about some of the lessons again, and then give room for questions. Is the part where we worked with social enterprises to deploy electric two-wheelers for farm logistics, in those communities where they intervene. So prior to the Energizing Agriculture program, Babanguna and One Acre Fund already had a large fleet of petrol bikes because they have to travel into rural communities to assess the farmers and reach them with necessary inputs and even extension support for agricultural activities. And so we wanted to check whether under what condition it will be possible to deploy electric two-wheelers within the communities. And so we worked with these entities, One Acre Fund Abangona, and provided six electric two-wheelers, and of course get them charged in mini-grid communities. And then the mini grid, of course, sells electricity for charging. The field officers or extension agents pay through the stipends that they get from the social enterprises for the energy consumed, and then they reached their farmers more efficiently. We found that while the upfront cost for electric two-wheelers is relatively higher of course, relative to the petrol options, it's really cheaper on a per kilometer basis, to use the electric two-wheelers. The cost competitiveness is great, and the high upfront cost remains, the biggest challenge to adoption. And for this to scale or to work, there has to be, high mileage. They have to travel significant distance, and of course, there has to be that ecosystem of support. So there has to be that support system, particularly for maintenance support, for spare parts provision, and so on. So just thinking broadly about some of the lessons that we learned, along the line, productive use of energy, no doubt offers promising unit economics. But profitability is a function of agricultural produce in commercial volumes. And of course, there has to be that co-location of multiple PUE equipments for the economies of scale to be very visible and for these business models to be sustained. So by that we mean, in a community where we've deployed rice milling equipment. There could also be electric two-wheelers for moving those across markets or farmsteads. And then another entity might focus on threshing, just ensuring that that capacity utilization is there and that the business model keeps going well. Then the equipment design must be tailored to local cross species to ensure efficient operation. We learned this particularly from our oil palm milling team, where we had bought a certain equipment and we realized that it wasn't compatible with the local variety of oil palm that was grown, and so we had to take it back for this to work. So ensuring that that information is received ahead of deployment is just critical. And then the sustainable business expansion relies on efficient on-ground operations and off-take linkages, which can be done by leveraging the community-run cooperatives. And then a viable business model is required for the operation and maintenance services to be close to customers. So the last slide is just having us think broadly about what it will mean to create a business model, particularly for productive uses. So first is to consider the partnerships that will be required. If you could go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, so the partnerships that will be required for the equipment to be deployed. Of course, in this case, it could be in the health sector, it could be in ag sector. So if I give the agricultural example, partnerships between the OEM or between the agricultural organization and the promoter of the productive use equipment, the community, the local agro processors, different partnerships that we really need for this equipment to get to those that would need it. Then there are key activities. What do we need to do for the equipment to get to those communities and deploy that scale? So we have to itemize the activities, identify the key resources that are required, and then of course value propositions. I already mentioned a few of them. What does this mean for energy cost? Is it going to be significantly reduced so that the people will see that value? And then what does this mean for even efficiency or time use? The time that they spend traveling around looking for particularly in remote communities, could be allocated to more productive uses. What are the types of relationships that we need to maintain? Have we done a segmentation of the market? What are the different, what are the different categories of customers that we can potentially target, and how do we design a product that works for all of them? And then what are those channels, particularly for us that are available for us to disseminate or to get this across to the end users? Where's the revenue going to come from, and what are our projections? What are the cost items, and how do we, ensure that we are minimizing costs and so on? So this is just a typical business model canvas, but we definitely is something that we need to use as we begin to consider deploying productive uses of energy, equipment, or appliances across more communities. I'm going to stop to take questions, comments, and so on.
Thank you so much, Seiji, for the very informative presentations. Do we have any questions for Deji? Do we have any immediate reflections? Please feel free to raise your hand or drop your question in the chat box. I'm not seeing any hands, so I'm assuming
I see there's a question in the chat.
Feel free to read it out.
They asked, what other industries have you considered beyond the agriculture industry?
Yes, thanks for that question. Because of the scope of the Energizing Agriculture program, it was just focused on agriculture, but we definitely know about some other uses. Like I mentioned when I started the presentation, productive uses of energy is critical, particularly in the rural environment for several things. In the health sector, for example, during some of our site visits, we saw the mini grids supplying power to a local health clinic for them to be able to provide at least 12 hours of service to their patients, or even in certain situations, ensuring that they have power throughout the day so that they are able to reach more people, particularly for emergencies, and even ensuring that the cold storage, particularly for vaccines, are kept in a way that are still the vaccines are still viable. So there are a number of uses. It just depends on what we prioritizing within the community. But in this case, the Energizing Agriculture program demonstrated what was possible, but definitely we can actually expand this to other sectors.
Thank you, Deji. Also feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question. But a Blessing has a follow-up question. So they asked if can you invigorate small-scale manufacturing industries with your business models?
Yes. So, and of course, small scale means that it's not as large, and so it means that there can be a partnership between the mini-grid developer and the business entities. So, for example, I've seen a situation where a mini-grid developer just sets up a standalone system to power that business entity. And then they have an agreement on how payment is going to be structured. So that, of course, is possible. What is even more important is how value is shared and how they are able to leverage this partnership for more gains, particularly for those that are in the community who are underserved, so that they can, continue to experience welfare gains. But definitely, the small scale manufacturing industries can benefit from this kind of business models. I see a question on seasonality challenge associated with many PUE activities and how it affects financial viability of the project. Yeah, thanks so much. This is a very good question. We experienced this during the implementation. So, for example, you realize that a milling business would be less busy in certain periods of the year because they are not just they don't have enough raw materials to process. And so it begs the question of whether we should even look at the entire value chain and see how we can even identify the entire value chain. So, for example, having solar, having solar, having solar irrigation systems, so that the productivity, because we know irrigation can potentially increase productivity by, upwards of 30%, even in, difficult situations. So can we get the production to increase so that there is enough feedstock for processing? And then can we also consider other activities? So for example, within so some people are talking about having a hub for processing. So if, for instance, rice milling is not immediately in season, what other things can we do to get that business entity running? So definitely affects the financial viability, because it means that the period that the business would have to generate revenue will be limited, and you have to keep incurring costs, because you might employ like one or two people to manage that business enterprise. But definitely combining this with other options makes a lot of sense. So for example, we've seen where people chill drinks in rural communities, and get supply to their customers, or do other things with the energy. um I hope I've answered the question, but please let me know if there is a particular, if there's something I'm not talking about. When is this getting rolled to East African countries, especially Uganda, where we have over 100 mini grids, with many solar mini grids in Lake Victoria Island? Yeah, so interesting question, right? I think this speaks to scaling. Uh, we we've learned a lot from this implementation, and I can only say that uh, it doesn't have to be us. Some of these lessons can be applied elsewhere, and that we will require support, for example, to move to Uganda for to get this on the ground. But definitely partnerships are possible, and also taking some of these lessons and applying them within our communities or our countries would work wonders, I'm sure. How do you make sure gender is mainstreamed in the PUE activities in off-grid sites? This is a beautiful question, and that also brings out some of the things that we learned um, during the implementation. So, for example, we found at a point that a lot of men were getting involved in the use of these appliances. And so we decided to check, we commissioned a study, a gender and social inclusion study, to understand what could be wrong. And we found that women typically work in certain nodes of the value chain. And so you are likely going to find women in certain areas. And so the question is, how might we involve them? And how do we even manage, how do we remove those barriers that prevent women from, accessing some of those opportunities within the space? So we worked with a rural cooperative, two rural cooperatives, in fact, to deploy threshers, because women are, very much involved in processing in, rural communities. And so those rural cooperatives came together to get, to assess the facility that our partners provided through the support, to be able to you deploy threshers as a business. So they thresh maize for farmers, and they get paid, and then they're able to decide on how they want the business to run. The same model, a similar model was deployed in a cold storage site, where women would just act as, they act as agents, aggregating fish in their community. So sometimes they even buy the fish off the men, and then they supply to the cold room. So there are a lot of value that can be generated across the value chain. But something that I think is implied from your question, which I totally agree, is that we have to be very intentional to ensure that we do not leave anyone behind. So gender and social inclusion is critical. Is funding for PUE community or private? Is funding for PUE community or private? what difficulties are encountered in the process of bringing the various partners together. I'm not sure I understand the first leg of the question, but please correct me if I got it wrong.
Just
Uh,
sorry to interject, TG. Just a quick one. While they're trying to clarify their question and trying to think about the answer to this question, I think we can move on to the next presentation, and then towards the end where we're having our discussion, we can then come back to this question, or if anyone has more questions for you or the following presenter, they can just jot them down or can raise them in the next in the session where we have our discussion, just to save time also. So we'll definitely note this question down, and then we can cycle back to it towards the end of the webinar or during the discussion towards the end, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for answering all these questions. I see there's a lot of interest, and I see more questions coming up. So yes, we'll save this for a bit later. So now we can move on to the next presentation, please.
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Very nice presentation, Deji. So just to introduce myself, my name is Amon Mwandime. I work as the Director for Research, Data and Standards at the Africa Mini-Grid Developers Association. Just go to the next slide. So also, I just want to explain who we are. Just a quick background on who AMDA is. So AMDA, which is the Africa Mini-Grid Developers Association, is an industry association which was created by private sector mini-grid developers who also act as operators, together with development partners and investors who are interested in improving the environment in terms of political and financial for the mini-grid companies in Africa. So our work involves accelerating mini-grid companies' pathway to scale and profitability. So as of today, we have around 44 companies who are members, and they operate across 22 countries across the African continent. However, recently, mid this year, we expanded our membership base to include now different industry stakeholders who constitute companies that may either supply or give products to the mini-grid developers and operators. And so far, this is going on well. So we've already onboarded like 2 suppliers, 7 in the pipeline, but we're seeing a lot of interest. And the reason we did this is we realized that there's a lot of interest within this industry and the different stakeholders involved. And what we're trying to do is bring all different players together in this sector together. So our next phase within the sector is to just help the sector grow to scale and sustainability. So over the next 6 years, we want to help achieve the SDG goal 7, which we know is universal access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable modern energy by 2030. And to achieve this, our value proposition to members, investors, and development partner governments and other stakeholders. Next slide. So what do we do? So we have 4 key cardinal pillars, and the first one is, of course, delivering member value. We try to support these private developers to have a sustainable business with strong corporate governance. And how do we do this? Brings us to the second pillar, which is access to capital. So we help our members, who are the private developers, to try to raise capital. And we do this by helping them engage with different funders and investors to attract a deeper pool of capital within the sector. Then we have the third cardinal pillar, which is policy, regulatory, and regional coordination. So of course, for mini-grids to be successful, we need to engage the government stakeholders, the regulators and policy makers, to have sort of a dialogue to enable advocacy campaigns to ensure that the environment is suitable for development of these mini-grids in those different markets. We also have regional coordinators who provide support to the developers in different regions, presently within East Africa, Francophone Africa, Africa, West Africa, and Southern Africa is what we are covering. Then the final pillar, which is the one I'm in charge of, which is research, data, and standards. We act as a reference point of a clear source of reliable data informing the private sector and what is happening within this sector. So it helps different stakeholders understand what is happening based on the research and information we collect. And also we're trying to help standardize the sector and promote sustainable development for mini-grids at scale. Next slide. So I think I'll go quickly through these business cases which have been mentioned basically, because I just from a developer perspective, realizing some of our members, what they go through, and including this business model of PUE. The examples have already been shared by Deji previously, but yes, I'll just emphasize that some of them, like when it comes to milling service, just to bring the context here, is that we know most rural communities depend on small-scale agriculture, but they lack access to services like the milling services, which most of them have to go through a long distance to process their grain. So of course, this challenge it involves high transportation costs, delays in going to find this, and loss for the farmers to be efficient. So some of our members, like here in Kenya, we have a member within the Western region who is provided a mini grid that is powering some of the local milling machines in the community. And this we've seen help reduce time and costs associated with the graining process. At the same time, it is creating income generating opportunity for the millers. And of course, from the private developer, they're getting high demand for usage of the electricity. The other one I know that you mentioned within the agriculture section is like water pumping and irrigation. So of course, we all know in the rural area that rainfall is not consistent, however, depending on the season. So without this constant water for irrigation for crop yield, we see that mini grid, so some of our members being able to give power to design for water pumps to provide these irrigation schemes throughout the year. Of course, what does this mean? Of course, the farmers get to have their crop yield throughout the year, incomes are increasing, and there's a stable predictability of demand for electricity. When it comes to cold storage, which Deji also mentioned, especially within the fishing industry, where we have some coastal rural communities who lack electricity for refrigerating this fish. So we see that the challenge is the fish, of course, gets spoiled. They're not able to sell as much as they want. So the solution is, yes, mini grid developers, some of our members, I know some in Tanzania who were able to help some of the fishing farmers come up with a way to store this fishing and also be able to transport them so that they don't get spoiled and able to improve their income. Next slide. Then there's a small-scale manufacturing. Of course, within the rural areas, we have the small-scale manufacturers who engage themselves in things like furniture making, metalwork, and of course, all this needs reliable and efficient electricity. Because some of the challenge they use is using expensive diesel generators, which increase their operating cost and reducing the productivity. Since most of our mini-grid members use renewable solution and it's more reliable, so this is allowing the small-scale manufacturers be able to operate their machines efficiently and even expand their production capacity, which, of course, if they use the renewable solution, it lowers the operating cost and increases the productivity. And then at the end of it all, the developer also is able to get a steady demand for electricity. Recently, there's a new e-mobility and battery charging, where in rural communities, transportation is an issue and they rely on diesel-powered motorbikes. So of course, challenge of this is cost, efficiency. Now, we have also one of our members, I think in Sierra Leone, who was able to help collaborate with an e-mobility company to produce, to offer these electric mobiles, and they're able to use their mini-grid site to be able to charge this and to power those motorbikes in that region. So at the end of the day, as you see, the developer is able to have consistent income coming in from helping use of that energy for this source. The next slide. So of course, there are challenges that come with the PUE, which developers face, and I'm sure most of you might know. The first one, of course, is the high upfront cost for equipment. So we know that many of these PUE activities are specialized, and if needed in the rural community, they're too expensive for the entrepreneur or the smallhold farmer who lacks capital or credit access to purchase this equipment. So what are some of the solutions we see happening is like financing mechanism, where some of our developers are using microfinance or lease to own, pay-as-you-go models that reduce the upfront cost for acquiring this equipment. Then we have grants or subsidies. Some governments and development organizations are helping subsidize some of these efforts to help adopting of these productive use technologies. So some of our members also using appliance leasing, where, of course, since the farmers or the households are not able to afford, they offer a leasing option where they're able to pay some of these equipments over a period of time. The second challenge that you see the experience revolves around limited financing for actually mini-grids themselves and the PUE projects, because mini-grids are perceived to have high risk and uncertain revenue streams, which mostly deter private investors and financial institutions from investing into it. However, some of the things that are happening within the industry is the use of blended finance models, where there's a combination of concessional finance, either from governments or DFIs, with private capitals that can reduce and attract investment and grants at low interest rates for loan, which will help these projects come up. There's hope for using risk mitigation instruments, that is maybe using like credit guarantees, risk sharing mechanisms that will enable investors to still come in and be able to invest if these instruments are there. When it comes to data-driven business models, as I mentioned, we collect data that helps the industry and sector understand what is happening there. So like within AMDA, we have a report called the Benchmarking Africa Mini-Grid Report, which we will soon launch. It gives information showing like impact and success stories that can help build confidence within the potential investors. And the other one is there's a bit of low awareness and limited capacity for PUE adoption within the rural areas, which most of them are unfamiliar with this technology or lack the skills to operate them successfully. So some of the solution is our capacity building and training, whereby we have some of our members either themselves or they'll partner with maybe an agriculture cooperative or an NGO to train or have a program to help the community to know how to use and maintain these PUE appliances. Trying to also raising awareness and demonstrate the benefits of using these PUEs, which could be from increased income from them, productivity, and improved lifestyle. This, of course, will help motivate adoption to it. Another example would be using a PUE champion program, where we can have a local PUE champion serving as a role model to help and educate people and encourage them to be able to embrace these technologies. Next slide. So just to conclude and call to action, we know that PUEs are actually from developers' point of view, they're helping them in terms of financial sustainability. And this one is because you see these PU activities are increasing electricity demand, which at the end of the day is driving economic growth within the community, building resilient and helping the community to become self-sustaining, which is attracting further investments. So our developers are proactively using PUE to integrate within their business models, working closely with the communities and partners, offering these financial solutions, which will create sustainable energy demand. And at the end of the day, that improves the community livelihoods and, of course, increase mini-grid profitability. So one of the call to action that we feel and what AMDA is trying to do is to bring different stakeholders together. So for this to work, we need both developers, policymakers, investors, and development partners to work together to ensure that productive use is central to mini-grid planning from the outset, which will help to ensure that there's a long-term viability and the realization of socio-economic benefits. Yes, thank you. I'll stop there. I think that was the last slide.
Thank you so much, Amon. I see there's a few questions for you. I think the first one was, what does it take for a mini-grid to be a member of AMDA?
So if you are a mini-grid developer or operator, you just need to have one mini-grid operating within the African region, because we are specifically representing the Africa. So if you have a mini-grid that is actually operating or serving a community, you qualify to be one. Or we have also provisional members who have started, because coming up with a mini-grid might take a while. So there are those who are pipeline and they'll want to become members before a mini-grid starts operating. So that's also another option. And as I mentioned, now we've also opened it up to different stakeholders, industry-based players, where we have different suppliers, because we get certain suppliers who want to be involved with our members. Maybe they're into the battery industry or supplying solar panels, and they want to be part of it. So that's why I've said we're opening this up to now different players in the sector.
Thank you, Eamon. I hope that he answered your question well. The following question was, just a quick one. How does AMDA ensure that accuracy and reliability of the data and information you provide on the private sector mini-grid market in Africa?
Sorry, come again, how?
It says here, how does AMDA ensure the accuracy and reliability of the data and information you provide on the private sector mini-grid market in Africa? I'm not sure if Mercy wants to unmute themselves and just clarify the question.
Okay, I can answer that. So as I mentioned, how we collect data is through our developers themselves. So far, actually, like I mentioned, we are about to deploy the third report for benchmarking Africa mini-grid report. So some of this data we get from our members are automated, and we get level details of how consumption data is happening based on the smart meter readings. So internally, we have processes of checking on this, and we have processes where whenever we see anomalies, we work with different consultants who are able to check that whatever is information we are getting from our members is actually more accurate. And since we are one of the few stakeholders who get primary data from developers within the African market, because I know different players come in and try to get information and data, but as we actually get it from the source, from our members themselves. And in case we have anomalies and issues with them, we have a one-on-one conversation with the developer who's given us the data, and we have those checks to ensure that whatever they're giving us is actually accurate. Then, as I mentioned, so that report, what we do is we aggregate, and of course, we will anonymize the report, because some of the information that we represent are quite sensitive. So not every information, not every developer is willing to give all information to the public to be known. So one of the reasons we do this is we make sure we tell them we are going to aggregate and anonymize the data and present it to the public. I hope I've answered Mercy, unless she wants to make a follow-up on that.
Thank you, man. I hope you understand. You can hear me.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, thank you for the explanation. It is really answering my question. And the next question about that will be, is the report? You mean you said you are now on the FAD report? Are the report open on the open source, or they are behind the paywalls? What's the process? If it is, what's the process for one to access or to be able to get access to those data?
Okay, I think during this discussion, I will share the links of the two reports, because the first one was launched in 2020, the other one in 2022. So allow me to, during this discussion, I share, or as maybe I'll share it with the team when they're sending this recording, how you can access it, because it's, yeah, you can download it online, or you can go to our website and you can find it online.
Thank you.
Because of time, can we please move to discussions, and then we'll have the guiding questions for the plenary for everyone. And I've also sent a message. Well, yeah, there's a message to everyone, just giving a heads up what the question will be, and if they have any answers according to themselves, feel free if they want to raise their hand, or pop in their answers in the chat box. So the one thing I wanted to clarify here, so we can go through the discussion while we wait for any answers from people or their experience, then maybe we can cycle back to the questions that were not really covered. So I hope that makes sense. So for our discussion today, thank you so much, Amon, first of all, and thank you to all the speakers and the presenters for our webinar today. Very informative, and there's so much interest in this topic. So moving on to the next session of the webinar is discussion, and our discussion will have like 3 questions, and because of time, maybe it might be 2. So what we're trying to find out here is, what are the barriers and enablers for including PUE into mini-grid business model? Then the following one is, how can projects plan for sustainable revenue streams? The last one is, how can we include socio-economic impacts into planning to attract development partners and impact? I see there's a hand raised. I'm not sure who that is, if I'm saying right. Yeah, please just unmute if you have something to say.
Yeah, my name is Miki Lazar. I'm a founder and director of Ogin Solutions Limited. We are an Israeli company that operates a lot in East Africa, and recently we have joined AMDA as members, as non-industrial members. What we do is exactly the answer for what I think is the enabling strategy for mini-grid deployment. What we are doing, we integrate a lot of productive use of energy into the one, I would say, structure, which we call that RMOL. RMOL comes from Rural Mall. In that RMOL, there is a possibility for several aggregations of activities for productive use. And then if we attach such an RMOL to each mini-grid developer, then when this developer access capital providers, that developer will have already the answer how to ensure sustainability over time and very high uptake of the generated energy. So by that, we create an enabling structure. We can ensure sustainable revenue streams over time. And also sometimes we can add the social economic impact by operating this RMOL and most of the activities by women groups and youth. So we come with an inclusive, innovative approach to the deployment of the mini-grid, because at the end of the day, the mini-grid is an enabler for rural micro-industrialization, which is the target of the whole intervention. So the mini-grid is just an enabler for the other activities to happen. So that's what we offer to the AMDA members, the developers. So we are one of the players that just joined AMDA. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I saw that Stephen also has their hand up. Feel free to unmute yourself and you can speak.
Thank you, Sile. So are we already on the discussion points now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so on the barriers, I wanted to state two barriers that I foresee on PUE interventions. And one has to do with the challenge of design and sizing systems, especially at a point where there is no existing demand for PUE yet. So you might want to size or design the system so that it will be able to address the additional demand for PUE in the future that will be created. So how do you appropriately size and design the system for it to be able to, by taking into consideration future projection for PUE demand in the future? That's one. And then second, on the operations and maintenance perspective, how do you do demand side management to be able to address the addition, especially the high demand or the high consumption of electricity as a result of PUE interventions in mini grid projects? Thank you.
I'm ready to relate to that because this is exactly what we do. In our design, we usually take one activity which is very relevant, the most relevant activity like drying, like immobility, like threshing, one activity. And this is the anchor of the whole structure. And then when we design this and size, we work with the developer so that the mini-grid deployment is done with inverters that can be paralleled. So we start with one, and then as much as the demand grows, we add the second, third, and fourth, and we avoid the situation in which we first do the mini-grid and then start looking for the demand. The right way is first identify a major activity in the community, do the mini-grid a bit more than 100% for that business, and then scale up. That's the procedure that ensures stability, sustainability over time, from our experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the two gentlemen. I just see that a question that just popped up. I'm not sure, Enoch, you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Okay, thank you so much. I was just curious on the responsibility of the mini grids, where I wanted just to learn this case of mini grid with the positive cash flow, and how long will it take to break even? Because all these, we want to solve that problem. So I just want to know what were the condition, or what was the situation like? Thank you.
I'm not sure if this question is directed to the two gentlemen that just spoke now or to the speakers that we had earlier.
With the speakers.
Okay. Is it for Deji or it's for for Amon? I'm not sure if you heard me, but I asked if the question is for Deji or Amon. Okay. I think, I don't know if he's experiencing technical issues, but because of time, I just wanted to find out from Amon and Deji, from the questions that were not answered, do you guys have maybe one or two that from each person, that one or two you would like to address, and then we can we can close?
Okay, I can probably try Enoch, but I think his question is quite broad, because there's no, so the best case will always depend on doing your due diligence. And as one of our members, Mickey, has just mentioned, is whenever before you come up with a PUE activity within a certain market, you have to sort of do an assessment to find out within that community what is the demand, what is needed there, for you to be able to know this will work. Because what we find out sometimes is people will come up with ideas and almost force it into a community before the other way around. Try to find out what need is in that community. Is it milling? Is that a key demand needed there? Or is it fishing? Is it... So once you identify the demand needed for that to bring economic activities in that community, I think that's the best way you start coming up with that, and high chances your profitability will be high. So we try to encourage that try first of all to do a demand assessment before just offering solutions to a community that maybe they may not be needing about it.
Thank you so much, Amon. I'm not sure if we have any more questions or reflections on what was discussed today. Oh, I thought that was a question, but it doesn't look like we do, and I think we can wrap up because of time. But what I want to say basically is thank you to you all for joining us today, our speakers and everyone who spoke today with your questions and reflection. We really appreciate that. Thank you for for joining us today.